an individual achievement, the way that it is for instance, Descartes. Self-consciousness arises through interaction with others, and how we see ourselves is mediated by how those others see us. Self-consciousness exists in itself and for itself, in that and by the fact that it exists for another self-consciousness. That is to say, it is only by being acknowledged or recognized. Each character wants to be recognized by the other, and a life and death struggle ensues, because as we saw, to become aware of the other is to become aware of the possibility of your own negation, and that can be a scary thing. There's this other, it's not bound by my will. It represents the absence of me. Does it mean that I'm disposable if there's just another self-consciousness that's like me out there in the world? I'm gonna kick its ass! In the same way, each must aim at the death of the other. The other's reality is presented to the former as an external other, as outside itself. It must cancel that externality. Or, in other words,
fuck me, pal. Fuck you. No. Fuck me.
The French philosopher Jean-Paul Sartre talked about the nausea of confronting the other. He thought it was shameful and thought one of the worst things that could happen to you was to be fixed by the other's gaze. Particularly if, and we'll be getting into this a little bit later on, they see you as something that you don't see yourself as. Hence his famous quote, "Hell is other people. Of course you want to kill them." Beyond just that though, Hegel thinks that neither self-consciousness can really know what it is until it's risked losing everything, including its life, until it's risked throwing all the contingent stuff away, the clothing, the physical health, the property, all of it. Risk losing all of that until you find the thing that you can't throw away, and whatever that is, that must be what you essentially are. For Hegel, neither self-consciousness can know what it means to be alive until they've faced death. If either one of them really killed the other, then they'd be screwed, because remember, recognition can only arise through being recognized by that other. But during the struggle, one of them values life more than they value being recognized, or they just lose the struggle, they become afraid, and the other becomes the master. They arrive at a conception of themselves as dominant over the slave, the one who experienced that fear, and the slave ends up doing all of their work. But the master is never satisfied. They've reduced the slave so much now that their recognition doesn't cut it for them anymore. What the master really wants is to be recognized by an equal, an independent self-consciousness. They've risked their life and they get the material rewards, but their whole conception of themselves is now bound up in the slave. Meanwhile, the slave is out there in the world, working on stuff, producing things, and as they work, they realize that the things they make reflect them. They understand the world they're building better than the master does. Like, if you want to know about pyramids, you don't ask a pharaoh, you ask the slaves that built them. The slave also confronts death every day, because as a slave they might be killed and replaced at any moment. And they realize that death is the true master. It comes to us all, master or slave. That's a much richer conception of what it is to be a self-consciousness. By working and confronting death, the slave arrives at a conception of themselves as an independent being, not just an extension of the master's will or a piece of property, but a self-consciousness who can say, I built the pyramids, I built the White House, there's a piece of me in this world, I built all of this, not you, I. And if I don't work, all of this stops. In the end, the master isn't the one that wins. The slave learns what it truly means to be an independent self-consciousness. And at that point, it's only a matter of time before they rise up. Part 3. What? I know that right now this story is very, very abstract and weird. Don't worry, we are going to get into concrete examples in a moment and it will become clearer, just bear with me. For right now, let's orient ourselves. We said this is called the master and slave dialectic. So what is dialectics? No, it's not the Scientology book, that's Dianetics. Dialectics is a method of study where we split the thing that we are studying into opposing or contradictory pieces. The idea is that if we want to understand how something works, then we should understand the sources of tension within it. If we understand the two opposing forces in something and the tension between those forces, then we can understand what holds it together and how it might change or react if we were to expose it to certain things. For instance, finally, an example, atoms. Within an atom, you have positively charged particles and negatively charged particles, protons and electrons. If you understand atomic charge and energy levels and so on, you can understand what holds an atom together and how it will react with other atoms. If you understand the sources of tension within it, you can do chemistry. You can even exploit those sources of tension and split it apart. So dialectics is the study of the unity of opposites. Vladimir Lenin, yes, that Vladimir Lenin, don't worry about that just now, said, "The condition for the knowledge of all processes in the world, in their self-movement, in their spontaneous development, in their real life, is the knowledge of them as a unity of opposites." These opposites are sometimes called the thesis and the antithesis, and when they clash, they produce something new called the synthesis. But how are we meant to use this? Is it meant to be literal? Because in an atom, there are also neutrons, which don't have a charge, and which we didn't really mention. And actually, the nucleus of an atom is held together by the
strong nuclear force, not by the opposite.
Whoa. Hold your horses. Personally, and this might just be me, I find dialectics to be more useful as a metaphor, which is why I presented it first and foremost as a piece of theatre. Metaphors are extremely useful, explaining something in terms of something else. A good metaphor should illuminate the thing that we are studying, not literally describe all of its aspects. Take, for instance, one of the most famous metaphors in the English language, "But soft what light through yonder window breaks, 'tis the east and Juliet is the sun."
Actually, if Juliet were the sun, Romeo would be incinerated by plasma eruptions of up to 27 million degrees Fahrenheit.
Not to mention cosmic rays.
High-energy radioactive particles.
Whoa, don't take it so literally. What Shakespeare means is, she's the center of his world, she's his light, she brightens his day, everything revolves around her. Notice how these are all metaphors too, by the way. In other words, Romeo is in love. So why not just have him come out and say, "I'm in love"? Because what brings you closer to understanding him? A flat word for the feeling, or a metaphor that illuminates the importance, the brilliance, the bodily basking in the physical majesty of this girl? A good metaphor can bring an idea home to you in a way that flat language just can't always do, which is why they're so common, not just in art, but in science too. Even in economics, which you might think is very cut and dry, but actually has shed loads of metaphors in it. Strong currency, human resources, economic growth, they're all metaphors. But let's get back on track. So, dialectics, the study of the unity of opposites, as a metaphor for understanding what exactly? Well, loads of stuff. Ancient Chinese philosophy, yin and yang. There's a kind of dialectic supposed to illuminate all kinds of stuff about nature and medicine and even ethics, understanding the physical world as a unity containing opposing energies. If you're a Marxist, you can understand society as a unity containing classes with opposing interests. That's why we had Lenin earlier on. Okay, we now understand what dialectics is and how to use it. So, Hegel's specific version, the master and slave dialectic. What's it all about? If it's a metaphor, what is it a metaphor for? Well, people have made whole careers out of that, and cards on the table, I'm not a Hegel scholar, which is probably why I tend towards using it as a metaphor. But what's it all about? Who is the master supposed to represent, and who the slave? Are they literal masters and literal slaves? Are we talking about the Haitian Revolution? Or maybe they aren't literal masters and slaves. Maybe it's about the French Revolution. Maybe they're supposed to represent workers and capitalists. Maybe the two characters are supposed to represent nations, and it's a play about nationalism. Nationalism in the face of colonialism. Maybe it's about men and women and the struggle for gender equality. Or maybe it's about the trans experience of gender dysphoria. Maybe it's about body image and the fear of being fat. We mentioned masters and slaves a lot. Is it some kind of kinky sex thing? I hope so.
I mean, just look at that face. Doesn't that look like the face of a man who's into some dirty, dirty.
People have taken Hegel's ideas and used them to talk about all kinds of stuff, which is more evidence, I think, for it being a really great metaphor. We could talk all day about the layers of meaning in Juliet is the Sun. In her book, The Rhetoric of Economics, economist Deirdre McCluskey says the literal translation of a metaphor is never finished. But because it's particularly relevant to the tensions in Britain and America today, let's talk about
Part 4. Identity politics.